My brother-in-law set his glass down like the conversation was already over. "Look, we're just being honest with you," he said, leaning back in his chair with that half-smile he always wore when he thought he was the smartest person in the room. "A man your age, still bouncing between consulting gigs? Claire deserves stability. Real stability." My wife sat beside me, her hand tightening slightly on her napkin. My mother-in-law nodded from across the table. "We're not trying to be cruel, sweetheart. We just love Claire. And we want to make sure she's taken care of the way she's used to." I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, said nothing. "My name is Ethan Cole. I've been married to Claire for 2 years. She's always believed I work as an independent real estate consultant, someone who helps smaller firms with acquisition strategy, bounces from contract to contract, drives a used Honda, and orders off the appetizer menu at nice restaurants because the portions are more reasonable. That's the version of me she married. That's the version of me her family has spent 2 years quietly tolerating. What none of them know, what Claire herself doesn't know, is that 14 months ago, I completed a quiet acquisition of Hartwell Property Group, the mid-sized commercial real estate firm where her father has served as regional sales director for the past 9 years. Every commission he's celebrated. Every bonus he's framed as proof of his importance. Every deal he's bragged about at Sunday dinners. All of it flowed through a company I own. I didn't plan for it to happen this way. I started buying up distressed commercial assets in my mid-20s, reinvested quietly, kept my name out of press releases, and built through holding companies that meant nothing to anyone who wasn't looking closely. When Hartwell came up for acquisition 18 months ago, it was a business decision. Clean numbers. Good portfolio. Strategic market position. I didn't even realize Claire's father worked there until the due diligence phase, when his name appeared on a regional org chart buried in a data room folder. By then, the deal was already moving. I thought about telling Claire. I rehearsed it 3 or 4 times. But every time I got close, I remembered why I'd kept everything quiet in the first place. Claire had fallen in love with a man who showed up to dates in a flannel shirt and argued passionately about which gas station made the best breakfast sandwich. She laughed at my jokes before she knew I had money. She called me on bad days before she knew I had assets. I needed that to be real. I needed to know it was real. So I stayed quiet. And then her family started. It was small things at first. Comments about the neighborhood we lived in. Questions about my career trajectory that were really just dressed up versions of "when are you going to be worth something?" My father-in-law once patted me on the shoulder at Thanksgiving and said, "Don't worry, son, sales isn't for everyone." He'd said it with genuine warmth, which somehow made it worse. By the time of this particular Sunday dinner held at my in-laws' house, in the formal dining room they only used when they wanted to feel important, the comments had escalated into something more organized, more deliberate. This wasn't casual friction anymore. This was a plan. My brother-in-law continued. "Dad actually talked to someone at Hartwell about getting you an entry-level position. Client relations, maybe. It's not glamorous, but it's a foot in the door." He glanced at my father-in-law, who gave a slow, dignified nod, like he was a senator granting a pardon. "We pulled a favor," my father-in-law said. "Not something I do lightly. I've built real credibility there over the years, and I spent some of it on you." Claire turned to me. Her expression was complicated, embarrassed, maybe, but also searching, waiting to see how I'd react. I set down my glass. "That's generous of you," I said. My mother-in-law visibly relaxed. My brother-in-law smiled like he'd just closed a deal. My father-in-law leaned forward. "The position would start at 42. It's not much, but you'd have structure. Benefits. A real foundation." He paused for effect. "Something to build on." I nodded slowly. "Entry level at Hartwell. Client relations," my brother-in-law repeated. "I know it's probably not what you pictured, but honestly, humility is underrated. Start at the bottom, prove yourself, work your way up. That's how it's done." My wife was very still beside me. I smiled. It was a real smile, not a performance one. Because I'd been patient for a long time. And patience runs out eventually. Not in a way that burns hot. In a way that burns clean. "I appreciate the thought," I said. "I really do, but I won't be needing the referral." My father-in-law frowned. "Ethan, I know Hartwell pretty well," I said. "I've been following it for a while, actually." My brother-in-law made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Following it. Okay. Reading their press releases?" "More like reviewing their financials." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I hadn't planned to bring the card. I'd grabbed it, almost reflexively, that morning. The way you pocket your keys without thinking about it. I slid it across the table toward my father-in-law. He looked down. It was a simple card. Matte black, clean type. My name, And below it, Managing Principal, Cole Capital Holdings. With a secondary line, Parent Company, Hartwell Property Group. The table went quiet in a way that felt sudden, like a door slamming in a house that had been perfectly silent. My father-in-law picked up the card. He turned it over. Turned it back. His face did 3 separate things in about 4 seconds: confusion, then a flash of something that might have been recognition, then a careful blankness that told me he was working very hard to control his expression. He stopped. I've owned the controlling interest in Hartwell for just over a year, I said. My voice was even. I wasn't performing anything. 53%, through Cole Capital. I kept it quiet because I prefer to operate that way. But since we're talking about my career trajectory, I glanced at my brother-in-law. I thought it was worth mentioning. My mother-in-law looked at her husband. He wasn't looking back. He was still staring at the card. My wife said my name very quietly. I turned to her. Her face was open in a way I hadn't seen in months, not angry, not betrayed, just completely unguarded. Like every assumption she'd been holding had just been set down all at once. Claire, I said gently. I'm sorry. I should have told you a long time ago. I paused. I needed to know that what we had was ours. Not a transaction. She stared at me. My brother-in-law pushed his chair back slightly, like he needed physical distance from what was happening. You're telling us you own the company? Dad's company. Your father's employer? I said. Yes. For a year? 14 months. He looked at his father. His father still hadn't spoken. The card was sitting on the tablecloth between us like an unexploded object no one wanted to pick up again. My mother-in-law finally found her voice. Why would you hide something like that? That doesn't make any sense. Her tone had shifted. It wasn't warm anymore. It had that clipped quality people use when they're scared and trying to sound rational. It makes sense to me, I said. The first time I came to dinner here, your husband asked me what kind of car I drove. Not as small talk. As an assessment. I understood then what kind of relationship this was going to be if I wasn't careful. I looked at my father-in-law. I wanted Claire's family to see me. Just me, not a portfolio. My father-in-law set the card down. His jaw was working slightly, like he was chewing something he hadn't been served. You've been sitting at my table, he said slowly. At my house, letting me. He stopped. Letting you what? I asked. He didn't finish the sentence. Because the end of it was, letting me talk down to you. And we both knew it. The rest of dinner didn't happen. My mother-in-law offered coffee in a voice that had gone completely hollow. My brother-in-law checked his phone. My father-in-law sat with his hands flat on the table like he was trying to feel whether the ground was still solid. Claire and I left before dessert. She didn't speak until we were past the highway on-ramp, the city lights pulling away behind us. Then she said, How much? How much what? How much is the company worth? I told her. She turned to look out the window. A long silence. Then, the Honda. It gets good mileage. Ethan. I like the Honda. She made a sound that was caught between a laugh and something else. I defended you, she said quietly. At brunch last month, my mom made a comment about how she hoped I had a backup plan. And I told her she didn't understand what you were building. She shook her head. I didn't know what you were building either, apparently. You defended me because you believed in me, I said. Not because of what I was building. That's exactly the point. She was quiet for a long time. I'm not upset, she finally said. I think I should be, but I'm not. She paused. I think I'm mostly just stunned. That's fair. And a little bit, and I feel weird saying this, but a little bit proud of you? I glanced at her. She shook her head again. Don't look smug. I'm not. You look a little smug. The next 2 days were strange. Claire and I really talked longer and more honestly than we had in months. She asked questions I'd been waiting to answer for a year. I told her how it started, the first small property I bought at 24 with money I'd saved working 2 jobs through college. The way one deal had funded the next, the way I'd stayed invisible on purpose because visibility always changed how people treated you. She told me about the small doubts she'd had, the moments she'd almost said something to her mother that she was glad she hadn't. The way she'd noticed I always seemed calm in ways that didn't match someone who should have been anxious. You never stressed about money, she said. I thought you were just weirdly zen. I was a little zen, I admitted. You were a lot deceptive. I was private. She leveled a look at me. You let my dad offer you an entry-level job at a company you own. I wanted to see where it was going. And where was it going? Apparently here, I said. Which is a better conversation than the one we would have had a year ago. Her father called on a Tuesday. I let it go to voicemail. He called again Wednesday morning. I listened to both messages. His voice in the first one was stiff, formal, a man trying to sound unaffected. By the second one, the formality had cracked just slightly. He said he thought it would be good to talk. That there might have been some misunderstandings. That he hoped we could move past any awkwardness. I called him back Thursday. He suggested lunch. I suggested the office instead, the Hartwell Regional Headquarters downtown, the building where he'd worked for 9 years. He paused for a moment when I said it, then agreed. When I walked into the lobby, the receptionist knew my name before I said it. The head of operations met me at the elevator. My father-in-law was waiting in the glass-walled conference room on the 4th floor, the one with the view of the river. He was early. I noticed that. Being early was an attempt to reset the power dynamic to be the one already settled when I arrived. I walked in and sat down across from him. He looked different here than he did at the Sunday dinner table. Smaller, somehow. Not in a way that made me feel good. Just in a way that was true. "Ethan," he said. "Thank you for making time," I said. He folded his hands on the table. "I want to apologize for the way things have been presented at family dinners. With hindsight, I can see how certain comments might have come across. You tried to get me an entry-level job at a company I own," I said. Not unkindly. Just directly. He closed his mouth. "I'm not saying that to embarrass you. I'm saying it because I think we've been doing a careful dance around the real conversation, and I'd rather just have it." I leaned forward slightly. "You decided early that I wasn't good enough for Claire. You never said it outright, but you signaled it constantly. The comments about money, about stability, about what kind of man I was. And I let it happen, because I was testing something. I needed to know if the problem was me, or if the problem was that you couldn't see past what I represented to you economically." He said nothing. "The answer was the second thing," I said. "And I think you know that." He looked out toward the river. A long moment. Then, "I built everything I have from scratch. I know what it looks like when someone doesn't have a plan. I was trying to protect my daughter." "You were protecting your idea of what your daughter deserved," I said. "That's different." He didn't argue. "I don't want this to be a wound that stays open," I said. "Claire loves her family, that matters to me. So here's where I am. I'm not asking you to be embarrassed, and I'm not holding anything over you. Your position here doesn't change because of what happened Sunday. The work you've done at this company was real. The relationships you've built here were real." I paused. "But going forward, I need things to be honest. With Claire. With me. No more performance at dinner tables." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You could have told me. When you acquired the company, you could have called me." "I could have," I agreed. "But then we would have had a different problem. You would have started treating me differently, and I never would have known how you actually saw me." He looked at his hands. Something moved across his face that I didn't have a clean word for. It wasn't quite shame. It was the expression of a man recalculating a long series of decisions and not loving the total. "She's happy," he said finally. "Claire. She's been happy with you." He said it like he was reading it off a page he'd been reluctant to turn to. "I know," I said. "I wasn't wrong to want more for her." "No. You were wrong about what more meant." He nodded slowly. "Just once. Small. But it was real." I stood, extended my hand. He shook it. On the way out, I stopped at the desk of his assistant, a young woman named Priya who had worked on his team for 3 years and who I knew from HR reviews was due for a promotion that had been stalled for 6 months for budget reasons that no longer existed. I made a note on my phone. By Friday, the promotion had gone through. I didn't tell him. He'd figure it out. My brother-in-law took longer. He texted me the following week, not a call, a text, which told me something about how he processes discomfort. The message was 3 lines, clipped, too casual to be casual. He said he hoped there were no hard feelings. He said he was glad Claire had someone who looked out for her. He said he'd be lying if he said he saw it coming. I texted back, "No hard feelings. Let's get dinner sometime." He left it on read for 2 days. Then responded, "Yeah, sounds good." That was progress. The press didn't get the story for another few weeks, and when they did, it was because I decided to step into a more visible role at Hartwell, not because I wanted recognition, but because the company was entering a significant expansion phase, and it made operational sense for the principal to be named. The announcement was clean, professional, 3 paragraphs. The calls started within an hour. Old college contacts who'd lost touch. A former roommate who now wanted to grab coffee. 2 different people who had passed on early investment opportunities and suddenly had a lot of thoughts about staying connected. I read through them with the same quiet I'd maintained for years, and I responded to exactly the ones I would have responded to regardless. Claire saw me going through my phone that evening. She sat beside me and looked over my shoulder at the scroll of names. Busy day? She asked. Manageable? She leaned her head against my shoulder. You know what's strange? I keep thinking about the first time I brought you home for dinner. My dad grilled you for 45 minutes about your 5-year plan. I remember. You were so calm. I thought you were either very confident or completely unbothered. Both. She smiled. I didn't tell you this, but afterward, my mom said she thought you seemed nice but unfocused. She wasn't entirely wrong, I said. I was focused on different things. Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Did you always know you'd tell me? Eventually? Yes. What were you waiting for? I thought about it for a moment. The real answer wasn't dramatic. It wasn't calculated. It was just the truth. I was waiting to feel like what I had was mine, I said. Not the assets. Us. I wanted to know we were real before I added all the noise. She looked up at me. We were always real. I know that now. She reached over and closed my phone. For what it's worth, she said, the Honda was a good call. It kept you humble. It got good mileage. Stop saying that. The Sunday dinners continued. They were different now, not in a way that was stiff or formal or loaded, but in a way that was finally honest. My father-in-law asked real questions. Not assessments. Not tests. Just questions. He wanted to know how I'd structured the early acquisitions. How I thought about risk. At the third dinner, after everything came out, he asked about a deal structure we were exploring, and we talked about it for 20 minutes, while my mother-in-law refilled the bread basket and my brother-in-law followed along with his phone in his lap, pretending he wasn't Googling terms. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. My father-in-law wasn't transformed. He was a man of his generation, shaped by certain ideas about worth and status that don't get rewritten over one dinner or one conversation. But he was trying. I could see it in the effort he put into asking rather than assuming. That's not nothing. After one of those dinners, as we were putting on our coats in the hallway, he stopped me. Claire and her mother were ahead of us, already at the door. He said, quietly, For what it's worth, I was wrong about you. I know, I said. A beat. You're not going to say anything gracious? You've got good people working for you, I said. That's a real skill. I don't take that for granted. He was still for a moment. Then he made a sound that was almost a laugh. Real, this time. Small. But real. I followed Claire to the door. The night was clear and cold, the kind of cold that makes the city feel closer than it is. Claire linked her arm through mine as we walked to the car. What were you two talking about? She asked. Business. She leaned slightly into my shoulder. Sure. We drove home through streets that looked the same as they always had, past the corner where we'd had our first argument about where to eat, past the overpass where her GPS always lost signal, past the gas station with the breakfast sandwiches we still went to on Saturday mornings because they were, in fact, excellent. Nothing about the view had changed. Only what we both understood about who was sitting in the car. I didn't need the reveal to mean something cinematic. I didn't need it to be a victory or a lesson or a story someone would tell. I just needed the people in my life to see me the whole thing, finally, at once and decide whether they were in. Most of them were. That was enough. The Honda, as it turned out, had a slow leak in the rear passenger tire that I'd been ignoring for 3 months. Claire noticed it the following weekend and stared at me with an expression I couldn't fully categorize. You own a real estate empire, she said. Controlling interest, I said. And I was going to get it fixed. When? Eventually. She pointed at me. New rule. You handle billion-dollar acquisitions. I handle the car maintenance. That's a fair system. It's the only system. She grabbed the keys off the counter. Come on. We're getting it fixed now. I followed her out. The tire got patched at a shop 2 miles away by a guy named Dennis who had a radio playing classic rock and a yellow lab sleeping under the front desk. It cost $22. Dennis gave us a punch card. Claire tucked it into the glove compartment with great ceremony. 10 punches, free tire rotation, she said. Something to work toward. She looked at me sideways, smiling, the way she had on the first day I met her, before any of it, before the company and the dinners and the careful years of staying quiet. Still the most low-key person I've ever met, she said. I turned out of the parking lot toward home. I'm working on it, I said.